Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the More Than You See podcast, where I have meaningful conversations with creatives about their mental health journeys. Please note, I am not a licensed practitioner or therapist, but an actor and a filmmaker who is deeply interested in sharing my own struggles and exploring the mental health of others. My hope is that these conversations bring you some joy, some personal understanding, and some tools so that you can build your own mental health toolbox. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode. So glad you're here. Man, this one is a doozy. This episode is it's longer. It's about an hour, but it is packed full of so many incredible nuggets. So I really hope that you listen to the whole thing. You can always pause it, take a break, go for a walk or listen while you're walking, grab a snack, and then come back because Becky and I talk about just so many different topics, and there was a lot that I really think is going to be good takeaways for anyone who is listening. The guest today is my friend Becky Tahel. She is an incredible actor and producer, creator, as well as a mom. She's got two adorable little children that are 4 and 2. And so we talk a lot today about parenting, about stretching yourself too thin, about prioritizing yourself, self-care, dating yourself, relationships, future goals. Like we cover so many things. And if you're listening and you're like, oh, I don't know if this is going to be useful because I'm not a parent, I guarantee that it is, because so many of the things that we talk about how parents and specifically moms get discounted by society, and how it's just another identity label that we use to belittle and to make people feel small, and how disempowering that is, and how all of these identity markers that are seen as negative are actually the things that give us such power and such diversity and strength and make up the fabric of this incredible world that we live in. And so I guarantee that when you listen to this, you will probably be like, oh, I feel exactly the same way. And that's kind of why I really wanted to have these conversations with parents, is because I think that there's this idea that parents are like this subset of society. It's either like you have children or you don't have children. And I want to destigmatize that and talk about how we experience so many of the same emotions, so many of the same anxieties and difficulties, no matter whether you have children or fur babies or a fish, whatever it is. And or you live alone and you're super happy with that and have no connections with anyone, like whatever situation that you're currently in, I think that we can all learn from each other and grow from each other. And that's really what this episode is all about. We talk a lot about mental health struggles as a parent, and the highs and the lows, and finding a neutral foundation for ourselves. Like, we really just dive into a lot of incredible nuggets, and I really hope that you will feel seen and heard in this episode as much as I did. And if you do, please reach out to us on Instagram, because I would love to hear from you and hear what resonated with you in this episode. So without further ado, here's Becky. Becky, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks so much.
I'm so excited. She finally asked. I've made it.
How are you doing besides just being over the moon excited?
I'm chronically tired. I'm a mom and a business owner, I guess. I just tired, but yeah, excited about life and like learning to live in a constant state of doing too much and never doing enough for myself. #mom. Yeah.
Ooh, for sure. Yeah. What do you do when you like need to take a break for yourself? Do you go for a walk? Do you have a scream?
The fact that that's such a foreign question is horrifying. What do I do if I scream, LOL? I tend to grab a glass of wine and sit and watch a Netflix show. It's like, or catch up on social media messages, which to me is not, it's not doom scrolling or scrolling through Instagram for pleasure. It's actually where I have connection with friends and there's unread. I'm that girl that if there's like unread texts and DMs and emails, like it weighs on me. So that feels like self-care. Is like getting back to my friends and having meaningful connection, whether that's text or DM, is catching up on that stuff, or Netflix.
For sure.
What
How was the pandemic for you? Because you're such a social person.
Well, I was pregnant during the pandemic and I gave
Mm-hmm.
birth and I was a first-time mom and was a newlywed. So like a lot of this new stuff I think maybe was it was positive for me to incubate and not be out with people with a bunch of opinions on how to be a mom and be a wife and like manage things and live in the world. So it was isolating and I think that only popped up later. I was a part of different virtual groups, like mom groups, because I knew I needed support. I mean, the literature tells us we need to be with other moms, but I was like, oh, but I'm fine alone. I wasn't really fine alone. I was good. I was surviving because isolation can feel really nice when you don't want other people to like tell you what to do. But when I started to tap into mom groups, I started to actually recognize like how lonely and sort of sad I felt deep down that I didn't have like my mom right there or my grandmother right there or like a bunch of women around dropping off food or like helping or holding the baby or showing me how to nurse. And so I look back now and I'm like, it would have been different, to just chat. Like even now, my kid has a little rash, and to be able to talk to a mom up the street that's like, oh, we just went through that. It's one of those. It just normalizes. I didn't have any of that. So I was by myself, but it was also
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah,
It's nice.
for sure. I want to first jump into your acting, producing, like industry side of yourself because, obviously I want to talk about parenthood and how that relates to your identity, but first and foremost, before you were a mom, you were a lot of other things. So like what other identity markers would you set for yourself?
Such a beautiful question and something that I'm still putting together in the puzzle of me
Mm-hmm.
because it was like pre-mom and post-mom in terms of what identities felt like they were most me. And before it was like creator. I was an actor, I was a producer, and I was a writer. And I was helping support other influencers and thought leaders in creating meaningful content. And I was also tapping into my own thoughts in producing a documentary and short form content and a brand, like a platform. Who am I if I'm not acting, because acting is hard and scripts don't always come your way? So yeah, what kind of like who am I? What's my story? What story do I want to breathe into the world? So definitely writer, storyteller, producer was who I was and am, but then like post mom, and I remember my documentary American Birthright was just coming out the year that I gave birth. And so I like birthed a creative child and then birthed a real child and was like, oh, I thought like I'd feel more excited about it. Like I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. But it was like, oh, I did that. Like that's what I do. I birth things, like I create things, and it was no big deal. And so I was like, sort of in the inquiry, like really curious about why didn't that feel bigger? Why
Yeah.
wasn't I able to celebrate it more? And my husband, Nathan, was been really grateful for some of his insight. Of course, he brings in music stuff because that's his background, but was like, well, John Mayer was like, felt the most depressed at his most successful because he had done like basically the things that he wanted to do and was like, well, what now? Like, what is there left for me? I don't think I got to that level. Like, I certainly hadn't, you know, no one knew who I was, and we certainly weren't financially free. It was just a documentary and my first child. But, like,
Right.
even just to see how these markers were setting up like expectations for how I should feel about the successes within each of those markers. And I was like, is that really what's fulfilling? Like, if I couldn't sell, like, is that really what I was celebrating? And so I think now, my oldest is she'll be 4 in October. My youngest just turned 2. They say you're like still in postpartum 2 years after. Like it takes 2 years to get back to some sort of sense of who you were. And then like, and some people say you're really in postpartum like 7 years later. Like really, it's a whole 7 years of like really coming back to a sense of autonomy. And so I'm now a lot more patient with my mess and a lot more gracious and like less judgmental of myself for not doing more, not manifesting as much, because I was definitely that very strong masculine, like do energy. And now I'm trying to, and failing often, but trying to leave space for a lot of those markers to just sort of like show me what they want to be and not be so caught up in what I think they are.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I want to touch on so many things you said, but like, when you come down from a film or come down from a big booking, come down from a job, like everyone, like I'm at the point where now I expect it, anticipate it.
Hmm.
And the problematic side of it is that then you don't allow yourself to celebrate it as much because then you know that the crash is then harder and longer. And I think that that's part of the difficulty of like human conditioning of like knowing what is going to be positive and like how the other shoe is going to drop. And it makes so much sense, obviously post birth, you have a lot of hormones rushing in your body. Post birth of a project or a big job or whatever, you also have, your serotonin levels, like all of your hormone levels have spiked. And so now you're settling down. And like something that I think about all the time, this is like something I talked about in the first season, I think in the hormone episode, was that like the reason that they say that like so many young celebrities, young musicians, like anyone that's in the limelight, your brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25. And if you are in a heightened sense of like excitement and like performance and like getting validation from people constantly, then your like your neutral level is actually much higher than it should be.
Wow.
And so then that's why people turn to drugs and all sorts of things, because they're constantly chasing that high, because their high is their like
baseline
foundation. It's their baseline. Yeah. And so I think that it's such a good reminder for ourselves as well, as like as parents, when you are like in pregnancy, your hormones are going crazy and you're constantly getting more and more hormones in your body. And so of course it would take a long time for your body to then get back to a baseline. Same as if you were on a project that you've been working on for a very long time. It would take a long time for you to get back to that baseline.
Yeah. I mean, it's also really clarifying what you're saying. I was like, I just wrote down chasing the high. And I think becoming a mom forced me to I couldn't take on as many things because I did want to be really present for my daughter and my relationship. And I couldn't do as much. I was in bed for the first, few weeks nursing and figuring out how to sleep and get her to sleep. Right. So there's stuff that I couldn't do that was very off brand for me. And so there's a little bit of like grief of not being who I thought I was, right? And like not being able to do that and not rising up to the occasion, but also having like a sense of awareness. Like this is normal. I was able to say this is normal. But at some point you get back up and women get back to work if you're a working woman, and then it's no longer normal. And at that point, I think that's where I was chasing the high for the last couple of years until I realized, like, what are you actually chasing? Because at some point your kids are going to grow up, they're going to be out of the house. And what, you're going to be really happy that your house was like picked up and that you did so many different brands identity and verbal like strategy, like what really matters. And I think motherhood really forces you to look at what you're chasing and having it be your kids more than the high of productivity, which is my previous sort of identity. And so now I'm still in that exploration of like, what is the most fulfilling form of productivity for me? I'll be playing with my kids and like picking up their toys as I'm playing with them, being like, well, why can't I just do this tonight? Can I play and be present? And it's that old me that was like, I would absolutely be I'd be producing 3 things at once. So to just be with a kid is like not the old identity, and that death of productivity and that sense of who I think I need to be in the world to be good and to be accepted and to be loved and fulfilled is going away. And so I'm working a lot through that and trying to just be like, you can be with your kid. You don't have to clean up. You don't have to also be doing this. You don't also have to be doing that. This is enough.
Right. Oh man, this is so me. This resonates so much.
Really?
And it's
like me.
Oh my God. Oh gosh, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm the same. I'm like such a type A, like I just want to get all of the things done. And, I had a good cry the other day after a therapy session about how like I've always wanted to work and to take care of my child. That has always been the way that and I still know that that's the case. However, I think that I'm going into motherhood with that, like I'm like a little bulldog where I'm like, you're not taking it from me, like you're not taking my work from me, like fuck that. And that's just so unhelpful. And it's unhelpful. And the reason that I was like crying the other day is I was like I don't feel like I will be enough if I'm just a mom. And like and I know that that's like the thing. It's one of those things where it's like when they say like if you like you don't need to be worried about you being a bad parent if you're worried about being a bad parent.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's the same thing where it's like I know that like because I'm already stressed about my productivity, that I'm still going to continue to be productive and still going to continue to push myself forward
Yeah.
in some capacity once I have this child. However, I'm still stressing about it now, and it is something where it's hard to live in the moment and just be present with what is currently happening.
100%. You're making me, I mean, you're just a mirror for me. And the holding on and like you're not going to take this from me. I think in some ways I subconsciously did that and would get really angry at my kid who was an infant if she didn't sleep because that was the time I had budgeted because I knew she usually naps and it'd be the day that I planned to take a call or catch up on a script or do something. I'm like, I'm going to do it where she doesn't sleep. And now I'm mad at her, at an infant, because she's taking away this thing and that anger. And I still find it come up here and there because I'm not perfect and I'm still healing, but where my kids are loud or aren't doing what I want or whatever it is, because I have a different idea of what they should be giving me as if they owe me something because I am not able to let go and be present. I don't know. It's hard.
People often say that like once you become a parent, especially once you become a mom as an actor, it actually like opens up things in a really beautiful way, and like it actually like your career, once you settle in, it becomes like explode, like it's like it's a real positive thing. What why do you think that is?
Yeah. It's I see it and for me I was like, I don't know. Like I'm Jewish and the Jewish wisdom tradition was always like, oh, when you have more kids, more blessings. And I'm like, they're expensive. So where more blessings? Who God's giving me money? That's never wrote me a check in my pay. I have a tough time really believing that. Like that doesn't, I'm logical, right? Like more work equals less. That didn't in my mind seem to be the case. And then I spoke to my friend Ayelet, and she was like, mom to me was like, you have a lot on your plate before, and then you become a mom, and the plate becomes a platter. You are stretched. Your capacity is stretched. Your body is stretched, right? Like you literally get stretched. And I fully experienced that with both kids, just getting stretched in a way where at the end of my days before children, I was like, damn, I did a lot today. Because I did. But my days now are like, holy shit, how did I do all of that? Like it is
Yeah.
insane the amount that you're able to do with energy and discipline and consistency and passion. Where like before I'd lose moments. I didn't have that big of a why. I just don't think I had enough that I had to show up for. And it's not had to in a bad way. It's had to in like a biological way. Like I would love to not wake up at 6 every morning, but my body will now not let me not do that. Like I have to get up. My kids need me and I want to show up for them and I love being with them and they're adorable in the morning. And it's not that's a new piece that gets stretched. You are able to do more. And I think when your platter is stretched as a mom, then what you are able to bring in is stretched as well. And suddenly, and I saw this for myself, our income grew and our project scope grew. And a lot of our vision for the world and what we saw that we could do grew. I dug up an old vision board in 2013, which is about 10 years ago. And my dream was like, making $5,000 a month and living in a 2 bedroom. And I was like, that's what our home costs alone. Not like that was the cap of what I saw myself making. So I think it's really interesting to see that I didn't have the lens and I didn't have the capacity and the vessel. Like I wasn't a platter yet. And so I wasn't able to do that. And also as a mom, you just find more time for the things you need to do. Like I know that that's a thing, but like we find more time because there's just not as much of it. And that's a redundancy, like that's been said, but it is so true. Like when you don't have a lot of time, you end up prioritizing and optimizing it more. And so I just think we end up doing more. I also just like believe in the laws of the universe. Like because you're just a bigger person, you're just sustaining more and you need more, you get more.
Yeah, completely. And I think the other piece is that, like, at least for me listening to you, is like, oh, well, with the just having to be present part, like, I mean, obviously that's a gift as an actor, but even in any other field, like being able to truly acknowledge where you're at and still know where you want to go, but to kind of sit in the present moment and be like, I'm really proud of what I have done right now and where I'm at right now. And yes, I want to do more, but like being okay with now is something that I really struggle with. Like I'm constantly someone who's like, what's next? What's better? What's bigger? What's better? Blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And being forced to be like, you know what? That is a future thing. And I'm just gonna sit in the present moment, and that's it. And that's enough.
That's beautiful. It makes
Yeah.
me think about how like gratitude, you have more gratitude as a mom because the littlest things you're like, yes, like my kid isn't sick this week or my kid slept through the night. And suddenly you have little moments of gratitude and gratitude creates the circuitry for more great things. So that's exactly it. Before kids, you're just like, you're grateful, but at bigger markers. But after, and when with children, you're grateful at the tiniest little things. And that starts sending messages out of like, I'm here for this. Like I'm ready to receive life. And you get more. You get more with that sort of approach.
For sure. Yeah. And I think, it's like for anyone listening who's like not a parent or has zero desire to be a parent or anything like that, I think like the lessons are still the same, where it's just like the importance of sitting in the now, acknowledging what you have, of course, still planning and dreaming for the future, but like being truly happy. Because like, of course, we hear that all the time where it's like, yeah, once you're making millions and millions of dollars, unless you were happy when you were making $5,000 a month, like you need to work on your mindset now in the smaller
100%.
space.
100%. And if you're listening and you don't have children, it's like this is the opportunity to work on yourself before you get into that stage of having children.
Sure.
Because, like you can only do so much healing. And of course, like, do I wish I was even more evolved before having children? I want to be more evolved every moment. I'm glad I did as much work as I did on myself. For me, marriage wasn't for my 20s, and that was my personal choice. And so I knew a lot more about myself, but I absolutely agree with you. I think these are like life nuggets that ultimately this whole lesson of gratitude is because, well, first of all, there is no later moment. There is no future. The future, it doesn't exist. This is an Eckhart Tolle video that just came to me in my Instagram DMs that I was catching up on when I had a moment to myself after the kids were in bed. But basically, it's like there is no future. It only presents as the present moment. And so if you can't show up to a present moment with a sense of sort of gratitude for who you are in that moment, you will never enjoy the future, which doesn't exist because it's going to present as the present, right? You know what I mean? So it's like, if you're listening without kids, work on your shit. I think that's beautiful, and learn from the moms. I think I babysat and was a nanny for a long time and I'll deal with that then. And I think listening to the wisdom of women who have brought life into the world and are platters and are, keeping a bunch of other little humans alive is important. There's some wisdom there, and it's all valid.
Yeah. It's all such a human experience.
Yeah.
Just like 3 rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Would you rather travel to the past or to the future?
Oof. Fuck. That's a really hard question. I I want to travel to the past. Yeah, the past. The past,
Nice.
100%.
What is the last thing that you bought that was like an impulse buy?
A really expensive Roomba. It's called something with an E, and it like cleans and mops your floor and like knows the temperature of the water and like replaces the dust. It puts the dust in. It's just like no one needs a $600 thing like that, but I'm not going to pay for a cleaning lady, so we have that now.
That
Mhm.
sounds great.
Yeah.
What is one trait about yourself that you love?
I love my optimism and like that spunk. I love life and I love living life, and I think that for me is what gets me excited about being in my own body, and from what I hear others say is what has them enjoy being around me, which makes me in turn enjoy my life as well. So that sort of that love and hunger and zest for life, that spunk, the can do, the optimism, for sure. Like if I lost that in the next moment, I'd be like just really bummed. Really bummed.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for it.
So never lose it. Find it again.
Thank you.
How has your relationship changed
Oh my God, it's
since
so
you
funny.
became?
And you were just gonna ask that, and I was like, oh, I just saw this podcast. The This Is Us cast has a
Huh?
podcast, which I didn't know. It's called That Was Us.
Interesting. That was such a great show.
Oh, I'm just mourning for it being over. Nathan showed me a nugget from it, and it was like
Mhm.
what they don't tell you about becoming a parent is how much you're gonna miss your partner.
Hmm.
And I was like, and he was showing it like we were tired and we're doing so many other things. And Nathan and I didn't date a ton before we got married, and I got pregnant right away. So we had, a year of dating and then 9 months of being married, and baby came. And so that pressure cooker, it's like we learned a lot about who we were as a couple, like married with children, moving during the pandemic. We then lived in an RV and traveled around the country because we thought that was a cool idea, which it was, but it was also really hard with a newborn. And then we moved back into a couple different houses and lost family members. And a lot happened in our relationship in the first 4 years of marriage that I think it did strengthen us. I have a lot more of like trust and love and respect and appreciation. But the relationship piece is something that has very much suffered for us because we just didn't get a chance to do it. Like we don't make time to do it. And that's been a recent thing where I was like, we have to make the time. Like, yes, they say date nights, and that felt really frivolous to me. And now I get that it's absolutely not frivolous, that it is a necessity for us. That's self-care. And it's like a
Sure.
self-care for us simultaneously, which is really nice to do, like, in tandem self-care. But that's the thing that's really shifted is that one, we can't just go and be the former identity, free-spirited travel, lovers and wanderlusters, because we can't, and our children don't travel well. But also, there's other priorities. And so again, I'm honoring that. I'm giving that like its place, and we know we're in it. We're not going to be in it forever. But while you're in it, I want to build, like I just gave the lesson to myself before, is I got to be in the present moment building the muscle now, because it's not going to be some future moment where I'm like going to magically be ready to be a different person. So we have to be the people who put ourselves first now. Our kids
Yeah.
will eventually be out of the house.
Yeah.
I cried when Ari was born, being like, she's going to get married one day, like the hormones. But also I was like, I couldn't believe that one day she'd leave. They will leave. You and your partner don't, ideally, right? They don't just graduate out and go live their own lives if you're in a monogamous relationship. And so that's a real thing. It has to be us first. And that's a very like Jewish wisdom. Like that's the biggest relationship to work on, is you and your husband. That is the biggest, and you and your partner, whoever that is. For me, it's a husband. And that is the most important, the holiest. And so I need to prioritize that. And I know that when we do, and which we're doing more of now, our children feel a lot better. They
Sure.
look at us. The other day, Nathan made me laugh and I was crying. And Ari's like, you look like you're crying. And I was like, I'm laughing so much. Abba's so funny. And she reminded me of that yesterday. She goes, remember when you were crying laughing? And like, those are, like, those are markers And that's the importance of working on your relationship and why we're doing it more. But that's how our relationship changed, like so much change. It had to.
That's so interesting. And I've felt similarly where it's like, Brian and I like dated for quite some time before I was introduced to the kids. At least it was about 6 months. And so we had such a it was great. And it was like, like a little bit secret because
Yeah.
it was secret. Like we weren't sharing about it yet. And so there was like that element of it. And then once that's when I was introduced to the kids, then it became about mostly me hanging out with the kids. And then when I moved in, it evolved into this completely different relationship. And then now with the coming baby, and it's something where it's like, I used to think, yeah, like date nights were silly.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, we haven't had one in forever. And we have the benefit of obviously like having a lot of alone time, at least right now, because we only have the kids half the time. But it's still different because when we're not consciously going like, this is a time to spend together, we're working. Like we're constantly busy and working and trying to just push ourselves forward. And I think that so that's definitely something that we're going to focus on, but also coming back to self and self-care and the importance of like dating yourself. And like, if you don't have a partner, the conscious decision to be like, this is an afternoon for myself where I'm going to take myself out for lunch or go do something to pamper myself or go for a walk, whatever you're going to do. I do think that like the conscious decision to go like, this time is for me or this time is for my partner or both, because we should have both of those times, is so important. And it only grows and expands our creativity, our relationships, the way that we see the world. Like there's so many gifts that are given back to us by taking that conscious focus for ourselves.
I love that. It's a muscle too of that present moment. If you don't exercise the muscle when you're single, if you don't date yourself and know yourself in relationship and in parenthood, it can be really challenging because you don't know how to speak up for what you need. You don't know how to advocate for yourself. The other night, Nathan was like, do you want me to sit with you? And I was like, no. Like I was like dinner time and I was like, no, I'd like to take this meal for myself by myself because I just needed no one around me needing something from me. Not that that's how Nathan is, but I just wanted to be by myself. And so to be able to speak that out, he wasn't offended. And I just had to say, this is what I need. If you don't date yourself, how do you know what you need? Like how do you know how to speak up for that? And I think that is a big piece of, figuring out who you are inside so that you can, again, be the best version of yourself when you're in relation to partner, child, anything. Totally.
Absolutely. So Nathan's like main goal in as a creator is to do singing, songwriting. Is that correct?
Musician. Yeah.
Yeah. So how, because I mean, I know that that's something that like he has definitely been a back burner thing for him. And I'm curious, obviously not to speak for him, but like how has that grown? Because I know that he is starting to focus on it more, but like how has that journey been for him to transition from like money focused in order to like just support the family to now having children to now like it's really beautiful that he's now able to be like, you know what, now is my chance to also like follow my passion.
Yeah. Well, I think one, I'd like to take credit because
as you should.
Truly there's two things. One is like if you're not a happy parent, your kids aren't going to be happy. And so I noticed that he was doing things that he felt would make us happy to support us, but he was slowly developing other habits that I knew were not because he was fulfilled. And so I called him out on it. And I think that's the beauty of being, self-aware and being in a partnership with someone that you can call them out a little bit. But I got lucky in that I was getting some great work opportunities. And I said, I'd prefer you not work and be happy and focus on your music and be a positive force in the space here than work and yet again continue to put what you want to do on the back burner, because music involves investing time and it is a tricky industry, and he's got all of the greatest connections and he's got all of the talent, but it requires that focus. And look, he's a human and he has sabotage and he's got a ton of it and he's got a ton of his own, which many of the greatest artists have. And I see it. And I think it's become more normalized for me because I see it in myself and I have a lot more patience for him. But seeing some of the constructs that he's created, like why him? Right? He produces everybody else's music and he does everything for everybody else, but he can't do for himself. And I couldn't understand that because I can certainly do for myself. I'm very different in that way. So I think he sees me and is like, okay. And then I sort of force him to do stuff. And I say, you're not taking on a job. You got to make music. And so he's very grateful. But that also doesn't help. Because if you're blocked and you're sabotaging yourself, there's still areas there that you're just not going to explore until you heal what's under that. And I think the kids have helped him because they love to work on music with him in the studio. They sing all the songs that he's producing. And he sees that and he's like, I want them to be singing my songs. And Ari recently was like, I want to record a song. She's 3.5. And he's like, this is amazing. And so I think like, again, kids, because they're of you, like they're both so musical and he sees that and it's starting to be more around him, where before children, music was sort of like it had left the space. It was something that he was living and breathing, and then he had to work and he had to provide, and it was in a past relationship that was sort of toxic and took music out as well. And so music was gone. Now music is around. And so there's more of that familiarity that hopefully those healed blocks heal more and more, and he's producing more and doing more of his own stuff. And I think, again, being in partnership with someone that's like, do your shit, because if you're not happy, I'm not happy, is a part of it. It's not the solve, but it's definitely a part of it. But I do think that children do fuel that because he's like, I want them to be proud of me. And I want to be proud. I want them to be singing my songs. I want to collaborate with them. I want to be doing this more. And that's a part of it. That's a start.
I posted something this week about like how much I was debating whether or not I was going to share about being pregnant and like having a child because of the potential backlash of not getting jobs. And I didn't mention in the post, but like there was 2 jobs this year that I lost because I was pregnant, and that was really upsetting. But also it was one of those things where it was like one of the roles certainly it certainly could have been a pregnant person or someone who was pregnant. It was just not the director's vision, and you have to respect that. And the other one, it literally did not match. Like there was no reason for that, but that's just, there is this stigma that once you have children, you are like you're removed. So was there ever a part of you that thought about not sharing that piece of you publicly?
No. And I don't even, like you say that and I'm like, really? Like that's a reality? I'm trying to see it. I don't see it because every great actor I know has children. And everyone that I know that's like big executives that I work with all have children. And we're working soon after having children. And that's been validating for me. Because I also sometimes like I'll look at a new mom and be like, there's no way hormonally that you can take this on right now. Like I'll limit women because I'm like, you should rest. Like your brain, my emails within the first few months after were like, Nathan was like, are you good? Because like your emails are on point usually. Like I was like, I'm not here. I'm just like pieces of me are coming back. That's okay. It's like I feel like almost like as a fellow mom, I'm more judgmental of other moms because I'm just like, one, I want you to rest, and 2, I feel like your brain needs a minute. But generally with posting and sharing, because I wasn't an auditioning actor at the time and I was producing my own stuff and my stuff was all about me owning my authentic journey, that was the new brand I built. And I honestly was a relief because I remember being like, well, I guess technically, and it was the Zoom era, no one knew I was pregnant. You couldn't see it. It's like you stand up, you see a belly. Otherwise, no one would have known. And so I thought maybe like people would judge a little bit like, oh, she's about to give birth, so she's not going to be available. And so we should probably just go with somebody who's single. I also feel like parents have more excuses to make around their kids being sick and not showing up and being late to things. So I was like, isn't it just easier to hire a younger single person? Like, I had some of those beliefs around like, well, maybe I shouldn't, I should share in specific areas. Same with being married, right? Like maybe if I walk into a room or a meeting and they see that I'm married and there's not the possibility of potentially there's, something there with me, like then they're not, like all of that stuff is like, is old me narratives of how I thought I would book a room or book a job or book a production gig, whatever it was. And like, thank God for social media. I think it's shown me that a lot of these actors, a lot of these people are in relationships and are have children and are late and have sick kids and are also struggling with mental health. And like, I'm owning that space now. And because of that, I guess I'm attracting people. Like I'm pitching 3 different shows to an unscripted company, and their exec is this mom with like 3 kids who's just doing all the things and owns that. And so I think we'll attract more of that if we own it. And yeah, so I'm all about owning it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good for you. What's your next 5 years in like dream scenario? Not the movie.
I know. I'd love to sell a couple of my own things. You know, the dream to perform and to be an actor, to be a host, like to just be in front of the camera was always the dream. And there's so much beauty to it. And we've talked about why. You know, sometimes I ask you, I was like, why do we want to do this? Is it vanity? Is it ego? Like, do I just want people to look at me? And it's like, certainly not that. I just really do love sharing in that way. And there's such a beauty and authenticity to sharing in that way. And I love the unscripted content I've been making. And I'd love to sell my own shows where I get to host and facilitate other people on journeys. And so those are a few pieces that I'm pitching. But then recently, my friend who's been doing a lot of fun comedy sketches cast me in his thing. And I got to act again. And I just got to walk into a set for like a couple hours and not do anything but act. And it was so fun. And he messaged me after and was like, why aren't we on a sitcom together? And I was like, that old dream of like being on a show, you know, and getting to that place where I can dream like that again, because the kids are a little bit older and I don't feel like, oh my God, if I'm not around at every moment, their lives are going to fall apart. I'm allowing myself to dream a little bit more into the acting, not just unscripted, what Becky can create as a producer writer and is easy to create in the spaces that I'm creating, but like that hard stuff again, the selling your script or the booking a sitcom or the, you know, national commercial, like those things were tough. And that rejection was tough. And that process of going after it was tough. And I don't know that I'll book things in the normal ways ever, but and maybe, but I couldn't imagine the life of going out for auditions like I had before as a mom now. I think there's things that just might not be. And so I'm in a place now of figuring out in the next 5 years, aside from selling my own stuff and running my own business where we do a lot of brand strategy and verbal identity and helping other brands create their sense of self so that they can go on to activate through commercials and content and stuff. Like I want to do that for myself. I want to do that for others. But like, is there scripted stuff again for me? And I'm not sure if that's the next 2 or 3 years, but it might be the next 5 years. It might be something that I go back out for once I sort of have a lot of my own calling cards and people know me, and it maybe just I don't have to go auditioning every day that just feels so not sustainable. Like I'm not 25 out there every day. Are you? Like, how do we audition as moms? I need to talk to more auditioning moms.
I mean, so much is still online or is still virtual. So that's beneficial. I'm also very lucky in that, like, you know, my partner also works from home, just like you with Nathan. So I'm like, if I got an audition tomorrow and I already had a baby right now, like Brian would come with me and hang out in the car and, you know, like I think, and I do think that that's where, that's another piece that I think that people discount. They discount like moms who want to make it work. And I don't, like, there's no shame if you would prefer to just stay at home and to pass. Like, absolutely. Yeah. 100% you're right. But like, that's definitely something where I wish with anything, this is again, beyond being a parent. And this is why I was like, the last 2 episodes of the season are with parents, is because I think that we kind of lump parents and are like, oh, well, now you're this whole subset of society versus everyone else. And like, that's just, it's so not true. And it also, like, we can learn so much, like you were saying before, from, you know, everyone in society, but also from people who are like in this pressure cooker environment all the time. Yes. And so it's like, if I have an audition and I want to make it work, then I'm going to make it work. If someone else is, you know, like, whether they have a kid or not or whatever, and they just don't feel well that day, or they don't like the role, or like whatever it is, they also could decide to make it work or not. I think that we automatically discount people based on X, based on their like ability, you know, like their physical ability, their whether they have children, you know, whether they're in a minority group, like whatever judgments that we put on people are problematic, obviously. And I think that it's, if we just allowed someone to have their own autonomy over themselves and be like, it's my decision. Do I want to do this thing or not? Instead of automatically judging someone and automatically being like, oh, I don't think you can do it because of fill in the blank.
Yeah,
like
and
that's
also whoever
not
says that, no, and whoever says that must not have been a parent, because what we've just been saying this entire time is that wisdom is building a muscle. We're in the moment.
Mhm.
You have more gratitude. You're able to prioritize and do way more. You're more productive. You're a platter. Don't you want to hire a platter over a plate? Like, don't you just want to carry someone that can carry more? So if we're
Right.
saying like, yes, the external thing is I'm a mom or a this or that, all of those labels have nothing to do with like that muscle that parents build to do more. Hire a parent. Basically, hire us moms. We're way better at everything. We're way better at everything. Like, we're just yeah.
Well, you know, it is. And it's something where I was just thinking, like, one of the other things that people always say is like, oh, well, parents like have more requirements, or a mom like might need a nursing space, or like whatever, blah, blah, blah.
But
And I'm like,
no.
but yeah, I mean, let's call bullshit. But all like, but also, I was just thinking about the fact that like that's, again, stereotyping parents as one specific kind of
Yeah.
parent. You aren't like, I'm just going to be super boastful here. Like, I'm a delight to have on set. Like, I love being positive. I love, like, this is why I like producing and acting. Like, I love just like elevating the mood of everyone, and like making sure that like even when shit's going wrong, we are
Yeah.
figuring it
Yeah.
out with a smile on the face. There's so many actors who I've hired or worked with who are the
Hmm.
complete opposite, who are nightmares to work with. And so, sure, if I hired them as a parent, like that would potentially be problematic, but I also wouldn't hire them as a non-parent
Same.
because they're problematic, you know? So I think that it is something where, again, we need to just like release stereotypes from people and just be like, let's just look at the person. Let's look at, like, yes, you may now have this additional identity marker for yourself, but, you know, you still are who you are at your core. And that's the same going back to like who you are as a famous person versus who you are as a non-famous person. If you're a good person at your core, like that isn't going to change, and like just hold on to that.
Yeah, hire what's on the inside, not what's on the outside. Also, it's so funny what we deem as like a really difficult additional requirement. You're saying like parents might need a room for nurse, might need this. Celebrities need a whole ton of stuff. Like, doesn't Mariah Carey
Right.
need like only the red Skittles? Like, I don't know. I have a gluten
Right.
allergy. People have requirements. How are some requirements more okay? Vegan, paleo, non-dairy must only have the oat milk. We're so accommodating to all of dietary restrictions, right? Like gender politics, like we're all into like we're embracing of so many other identities, which is lovely. I'm saying that like we should continue to be. Why not also the parent identity? And then it's primarily the mom identity. Like, what's so heavy about that one? It's interesting.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. We just have a couple minutes left, but is there any elements of your own identity that you feel like we haven't touched on, or any piece of advice that you want to leave anyone listening
Yeah,
with?
the last year I've been struggling a little bit more with my mental health. And this is something that I put out recently because I had anxiety in my 20s and it came and went, and I sort of knew how to stay just a couple steps ahead of it or use it or like kind of thrive off of it. And then having kids, I never had postpartum depression. I, again, kind of stayed ahead of it and I didn't want to, everything had to be okay, right? And at some point, I think it was last year, like the world started to sort of fall apart in many ways. And stuff. I think I was triggered into some sort of way where that platter was big, a lot was on my plate. I felt like a lot was on my shoulders. And the narrative of a lot is on my shoulders and this is great and I'm strong shifted into like I'm the only one that can do all of the things, where I would start stepping into spaces in work, like my pitch meetings, feeling like it was all on me, which is funny because like how ego, like it's only me. I'm the only person that could possibly close this deal. And that pressure, I remember I had my first anxiety attack. It was a performance anxiety attack. So I don't want to generalize anxiety attacks and I don't know enough about them. My sister's a psychiatrist. And so when I explained to her how this was presenting, she was like, oh, this isn't a generalized anxiety attack because of how your other behaviors after it are going, but that is classic performance anxiety. And I was like, what? I love performing. Why now? Like, why am I going? Why is this happening to me? Why is it attacking like the one area that I love? Oh, that makes sense. Like, because it's the one area that I love, because it's the closest to my identity, because it's where I thrive, because it's where fulfillment seems to come from. It's where I put a lot of pressure. And where suddenly all of these constructs are coming up for me because, well, that's how life goes. And it definitely does that to you as a mom, as a parent. We step into this new pressure cooker and more things are going to come up. And that's wonderful because transformation is on the other side. And I love change. Like I love getting better and I love growing. But this was a moment and I was not able to get through it. And it was performance anxiety attack after performance anxiety attack. And then I had one in front of the camera. And they were just in pitch meetings. Then it was in front of the camera. And I'm like, the two places I love, work and acting, like what is going to happen? I didn't fall into the loop of I'm doomed and depression. I was like, I'm going to figure this out. And so this is really just as a message to anyone that's going through anxiety or anxiety attacks or performance anxiety primarily, which was really big for me. It was around specific things, to not avoid them, to not become like, I just don't want to do them, because the transformation was right in there. I worked with my coach on it and I had a little bit of help from propranolol something. It's like a beta blocker, basically a beta blocker that helped put my body at less of a fight or flight, but essentially, I'm not a fan of medicating without getting a little bit of help to get underneath it, but it helped me to see that I was totally telling myself things in a new way now that I was a mom, in a bigger way that was causing me to freak out. My brain triggered my biology and was like, this is not safe. This is not safe. Run. This is scary. This is not good. And so I'm slowly rewiring and it's working. And this is 8 months in, but there is, these things come up. Also, as women, our hormones evolve, and that's a pretty late 30s is a fun phase to start entering into, but it's all beautiful. And as soon as I shared it, for me, it was on social media. I had other women in their 40s and 50s respond to me saying like, my 40s had a lot of anxiety. I remember motherhood. I remember my late 30s. It was very validating to start to see, not in a scary way, but as a normalizing way, that my hormones will shift, that my hormones are shifting, and that I can own this and get stronger through it. And it's only made me a better salesperson and performer. It's crazy. So yeah, that's been new. And it's definitely something that I would say hasn't been easy, but has been the best challenge ever. So if you're struggling with some sort of, performance anxiety, work through it and get to the other side. It is the best journey ever. And I'm totally down for the DM. I'm happy to make suggestions. I'm not a professional, but I'm here.
Yeah. So what would you say, like, is there a part of, we're all evolving and changing all the time, but is there a part of yourself that you still feel like where you're hiding? Like, is there a mask that you're still wearing that you're working on taking off?
Yeah, I'm currently working on, I have this immunity to change map. It's a whole thing that I've outlined for myself of where I have a big assumption. And my big assumption is that if I flub, that's not okay. Like, it's not okay to make a mistake. It's not okay to mess up. It's not okay to be human. Like, if you're a professional, you're perfect. You present perfectly and you say the perfect things and you don't need to take a break or a pause or a breath. Like it just rolls off your tongue. Like that's my big assumption.
Yeah.
And that if I don't present well, then I'm not okay and people won't like me or hire me or love me and I will never be fulfilled. There's this big assumption. And so within all of that, I'm committed to many things. I make these underlying commitments to never being unhireable and never being unlovable and never being, it's like, who's never unhireable? You just said you lost out to 2 jobs. Like everyone's unhireable in some areas, but I've made these massive commitments and they weigh heavy. And so I'm going back to that initial big assumption and working through it and trying to find areas where I can kind of check off like there, it's wrong. My big assumption's wrong because look at what just happened. It totally goes counter to that big assumption, right? So I flubbed and Deb is still my friend. I took a breath and didn't know what to say next. And the world kept on spinning, like finding ways to show my brain and biology that it's okay to flub, even though intellectually I totally know it is. I totally know it is. So that's in that area of performance is a big assumption for me. And then in my personal area is around productivity. And like I live in a mood of productivity. And every day is structured and I have tasks and I have to-dos and I very much look at life through a timeline of mornings and times and kids and pickups and that. And I thought about it even last night. What would happen if all of my to-dos tomorrow just threw up in the air and just sort of lived life moment to moment? That would never happen. It just wouldn't happen for me, but I try. It wouldn't happen for you, right? Like why? But I try. So I'm working through that of just this overproductive perfectionist with type A as well, recovering of hiding there and being productive. Why? For what? For what?
Yeah.
You probably heard this quote, but it's like, make your mess your message. And I always really like that.
I love that.
You right? Like turn. Yeah, make that the mess is just the part of your message. It's the beginning of your message. It's the beginning of that word. Let that be the beginning of your expression, your most authentic expression. Be messy. Who cares? We're so afraid of it. We're like, we brace for the shoe to drop. But isn't the shoe dropping like where we get that impact for transformation and growth? It's like that's the catalyst. That's the inciting incident in our freaking plays, like in our scripts. Like why do we resist the very thing we know is so necessary for our story?
That's true. Yeah, fail. Yeah, I had a guest on earlier, like in the beginning of the season, who talked about how he doesn't feel like it's a productive day unless he's failed at least once. And I was like, oh my God, that's terrifying, but also so true. And like he is one of the most prolific, like he's incredible. He's doing so many incredible things. And listening and talking to him, I was like, this is why. The problem for me is that then if I take that in, then I will push myself both to fail and to succeed at the same time, and will then overburden myself because I'm like,
with trying to succeed at failing. Yeah.
Right. Let's have anxiety from all of the directions. But it was such an important reminder, of the fact that like we need to fail in order to fall forward and continue to move forward.
It's that muscle we keep talking about. I feel like it's a theme through this episode, at least, is like that muscle that we're building at the present moment. So whatever's happening in the present moment, that's our lesson. We talked about gratitude. Now you're talking about failure. So like what muscle is being built by a present moment that's filled with the sensation and the experience of failure? And there's like, for him, it's like, in our house, we call it TMT. And I got it from a woman, Alana Cowland, who I learned it from. This means that. So lateness means you don't care about me. Right? Or cursing means you're stupid. I don't know, whatever, right? So like this means that. So failure means I'm not good enough for most people. For him, that muscle is just, it's rewired his TMT. Failure means growth. Failure means I'm on the right track. Failure means yes, like green light. So it's just about rewiring and reshifting and shaping those constructs and making new meanings around failure.
Great.
Love that.
Okay, where can people find you and follow you and DM you with their questions?
On the gram. I love the gram. I really don't have time for anything else. Like LinkedIn, please stop. I just don't know how to manage my LinkedIn. Becky Tahel, at Becky Tahel on Instagram. That's the best place. Find me there.
Thank you so much for being here, Becky.
Deb, I love you. I so value our friendship over the years, and I love everything you're saying on all of your platforms, and I love this podcast. I'm so excited for this episode. Let me share it all over.
All right, everyone. You made it. You made it through an hour. Thanks again so much for listening to this episode. I want to just give a huge shout out to Becky for coming on the show, being so vulnerable, so open about her experience. And it's just such a pleasure to be able to share space with so many incredible creatives and to have these conversations, these open and honest conversations. It's like this kind of conversation is exactly why I started this podcast, because no matter what level we're at, we all experience so many of the same things. And I think that this conversation really highlighted that. Special shout out to Keitra Parkman, my incredible friend and the editor of this episode, as well as Ryan, who is the composer for our intro and outro music from Salton Sea Studios. Please share this episode. Obviously, this episode, we talk a lot about parents. So if you've got a parent who you think might resonate, please share. I would love to continue to grow this community, and I need help, and I need all of you in order to help make that happen. So please share, social or through good old-fashioned word of mouth, and I look forward to chatting with you all again in a few weeks. Please be kind to yourself. Please remember that you and everyone around you is more than you see. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in a few weeks.